It's hard to say. All I'm going to say is
Yeah.
Omega is coming. I don't think we've reached FOMO territory yet. Nothing is slowing down. Everything is speeding up. So 1 million doesn't seem like it's a far away thing. I think it is very sudden. And that's the thesis of the Omega candle, that we just start seeing 100K candles daily. And I don't think it's far away. And I would say this is more of an orange swan than a black swan. But all signs point to the orange swan coming. It's like flying closer and closer, and it's about to land. And when it does, you're going to feel it. If you are alive today and you know about Bitcoin and you haven't learned about Bitcoin, it's almost all on you. There's no one to blame when hyperbitcoinization hits and you missed it because you didn't choose to learn a little bit more.
Mow begins by highlighting a reality that many still try to ignore: the fragility of fiat currencies across the globe. Countries like Argentina and Turkey are on the brink of currency collapse, with hyperinflation eroding purchasing power at breakneck speed. But what's more concerning is that even the United States, historically the issuer of the world's reserve currency, is showing cracks. Foreign appetite for U.S. treasuries is dwindling. Traditionally, foreign governments and institutions have bought American debt as a safe haven, but that demand has dried up.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
Argentina, Turkey, there are many countries that seem on the brink of fiat collapse. And I think they're still hanging on. Even the US is not looking that great right now. And I think that has to that is driving a lot of the initiatives right now. If you look at the US, they're embracing stablecoins because they have to. There's no other choice. Like, nobody is buying their US treasuries. Like Tether, I think, is the top 15 holder, up there above many countries because there is no more demand. So if you look at where things are going, like, fiat is definitely on its last legs, and it's possibly a few years away, maybe 5, maybe 10. Nobody knows for sure, but it's definitely not on an upward growth trajectory. It is gradually and then suddenly. And nobody knows exactly when suddenly hits, but you can definitely see the suddenly on the horizon with everything that's happening. I mean, ETFs alone are buying multiple times the mine supply of Bitcoin. Then you factor in the corporate adoption, which is accelerating. Like, strategy is not buying less, they're buying more, and they're raising more every time. I think STRC upsized from $500 million to 2.5 billion. Metaplanet is increasing the velocity and size of their buys, and then you have new entrants coming in too. Adam Back has announced a BSTR with, I think, 30,000 coins committed. So nothing is slowing down. Everything is speeding up. So 1 million doesn't seem like it's a far away thing. There are a lot of people that theorize that, post-institutional adoption, we're seeing less volatility. It's going to be a slow slog, but I just don't see that. Not with the velocity of the buying that's happening on the market. Even 80,000 coins dropped on Sunday night barely made a dent. Like, Bitcoin is numb to all of this now. It's just going up. The economy of most countries in the world right now are not in a good state, and it could just be that retail is broke. And it's going to be institutional capital. It's going to be investors rotating out of other things like real estate and gold into Bitcoin. Or it's going to be pension funds that need to cover unfunded liabilities buying strategy or a strategy product. So maybe that's the thing. I'm not really sure. But I would just add a caveat that right now, I would say we're overheated because you can see alts started to outperform Bitcoin temporarily. And in my in my recollection and experience, that's never a good thing. Usually we come back down, and then when Bitcoin dominance goes up, then we go back up again in a more healthy manner. I mean, there are always altcoin rallies, and then they always fizzle out. If you look at the history of crypto, it's like everything goes down over time. Nothing sustains, and that includes things like Ethereum. But you know, they're so small now relative to Bitcoin, and so illiquid relative to Bitcoin, that it is easy for people to pump them up. And that's maybe where the retail money is going, because they see quick gains and then they're buying an alt. And then the alt drops and they get flushed out. And that cycle repeats over and over. That's why I think it's healthier if we go down a bit. Even Bitcoin goes down a little bit, flush out the alts, increase dominance, and then go up in a more healthy fashion. I don't think we've reached FOMO territory yet. And again, 0.25, 0.5, those are my interesting targets. But I did a calculation a few weeks back about the cost of eggs and inflation. And if you look at eggs alone, the real rate of inflation is something like 11%. And if you factor that in with our 2021 highs, adjusted for inflation, you know, that's like 100K. So we're just kind of beating inflation right now, real inflation. And real inflation probably higher than 11%. Like, that's just arbitrarily picking eggs as a baseline. But, you know, that's not FOMO territory. FOMO territory is really outpacing inflation. And I think people will subconsciously know that when we get to, you know, 0.2, 0.25. And then they're going to wake up and go, okay, well, I need to get into this now because it's meaningful now. But maybe subconsciously the market just knows we're more or less tracking inflation. 80,000 coins dumped on the weekend, spot. It barely made a dent. And I think that is the most poignant example of reduced volatility. Like, in past years, let's go back 4 or 5 years, that would have significantly dropped Bitcoin, at least temporarily. But now it's almost like Bitcoin's numb. There's nothing. It's like, yeah, drop 80K, drop 100K, maybe 500K. Nothing will happen. It'll just dip down a little bit, but the buy pressure is just massive and sustained. Like, every corporation with a Bitcoin strategy is buying at that depressed price, and it just scoops it all up. I think it is very sudden, and that's the thesis of the Omega candle, that we just start seeing 100K candles daily. And I don't think it's far away. And I would say this is more of an orange swan than a black swan. But all signs point to the orange swan coming. It's like flying closer and closer, and it's about to land. And when it does, you're going to feel it. It's hard to say. All I'm going to say is Omega is coming. I think you're just going to see it happen, and it's going to happen faster than most people believe. It feels like the general consensus is volatility is muted. We're going to see a steady slog upwards, but Bitcoin just likes to shock and awe us. So I think, if anything, we're going to see 1 million faster than anyone thinks it's going to happen. Like, most models, Saylor's 24 model, Bitcoin 24 model, I think puts it out in 2030 something. He recently said in Prague in his presentation, 21 million in 21 years. And, you know, that means we're going up, 1 million a year, right? So it's to be seen, but I think all signs point to sooner rather than later. So it's better to be prepared mentally that, you know, it is coming, and treat your Bitcoin with that care and attention, and secure it and plan accordingly.
Despite his bullish outlook, Mow adds an important caveat: the market may currently be overheated. The recent outperformance of altcoins is, in his experience, a red flag. Alt rallies have always been short-lived, and they often signal that retail investors are chasing quick gains before being flushed out. In his view, a short-term correction for Bitcoin would be healthy. It would flush out weak hands, restore Bitcoin dominance, and set the stage for the next sustainable leg up. That's the natural cycle of crypto markets, and Bitcoin's resilience has proven that nothing else holds value over the long term.
In this day and age, there's just so much information. You have documentaries, you have movies, you have, I don't know, hundreds of books now about Bitcoin. It's just so easy to learn if you're willing to learn, compared to back when I learned about Bitcoin, where there was very little information. There's no podcast, like maybe one, but it's kind of like when Andreas Antonopoulos was talking to an empty room. That was what it was like back then. So if you are alive today and you know about Bitcoin and you haven't learned about Bitcoin, it's almost all on you. There's no one to blame when hyperbitcoinization hits and you missed it because you didn't choose to learn a little bit more. I think maybe 0.25, but definitely 0.5 M. That is where it really starts getting interesting. I think at 0.5, we've reached half of gold. So that's when the train accelerates. So nothing stops the train, but the train accelerates at 0.5. That's when you start massive demonetization of gold, real estate, and everything else, and it just gets sucked into Bitcoin. But I think it all happens very quickly because once you hit 0.25, 0.5 is not far away, and then 1 is not far away. Strategy has shown us that there is a glitch in the matrix, and you can get infinite money. Basically, that's what it is. Zero interest loans are infinite money. So as more companies find these kind of glitches, they'll tap into them. Metaplanet's another example. It's partially regulatory based because buying spot is punitive. So people will just buy strategy for exposure. Buy Metaplanet for exposure. So I think there are different glitches in different regions and jurisdictions that let companies tap into this money glitch. And that is good for Bitcoin because it accelerates hyperbitcoinization. It accelerates the global wealth that is flowing into Bitcoin. When people are holding funds in ETF, it's obviously suboptimal to holding Bitcoin on your own wallet, which is actually far easier to do, to use Bitcoin as a bearer asset than, say, gold. And, you know, I'm conflicted too. Like I see the value in ETFs because it gives ordinary people access to Bitcoin, and they don't need to go through the challenges of learning self-custody, even though we as Bitcoiners don't think it's a hard thing. But conceptually, for a normal person that's never touched a crypto asset, you know, having complete responsibility is a scary thing, believe it or not. So ETFs eliminate that, but ETFs also act as a portal to TradFi money. And I've said this like numerous times over the past few years since ETFs were approved, but there is no more barrier to capital inflow to Bitcoin. You can look at jan3.com/charts. We have a number of charts on ETF flows, but you know, inflows are predominant, as we know, and there is no barrier. So in past bull runs, you would see like Coinbase goes down or something, or exchanges are backlogged, like Kraken, Bitfinex, they can't KYC fast enough, and then the bull run tapers off. But that's not the case anymore. Like you have, everyone has a brokerage account, or most people have a brokerage account in the Western world, and they can simply buy, and you eliminate that need to onboard at an exchange. So that's a huge thing. But moreover, having that portal to TradFi money means pension funds, institutional capital, those can all flow directly into Bitcoin unhindered. And that is a big thing. Like if you tell a pension fund, similar to we're talking about nation states, you know, buy Bitcoin and hold it, the first question is, can we get the approvals? Can we get sign off? Can we change our charter? But then second is, how do we hold it? Like, is someone going to set up a Blockstream Jade and keep it there, or set up a multi-sig? There are a lot of complexities, just like with a country, on how to hold a bearer asset, and especially something like Bitcoin. So having the option to just buy IBIT or FBTC or what's Bitwise's, you know, it just changes the whole game, and there is no more barrier to entry. Hyperbitcoinization, if you don't know, is the point at which you don't need to sell Bitcoin anymore. It's like the meme from the Matrix where Morpheus asks Neo, what are you going to do when Bitcoin is $1 million. Like, you don't need to sell it. Right? It's just Bitcoin everywhere. But it's really just getting more Bitcoin adoption and making it so that you can just sit in Bitcoin and live your life in Bitcoin. And I guess the broader mission is to make Bitcoin accessible too, kind of extending what I started at Blockstream, because we build on a lot of Blockstream technology. A lot of people don't appreciate this, but Blockstream's invested massive amounts of capital and resources and manpower into these scaling technologies. And at Jan3, we're leveraging those things to build Aqua and build a super accessible wallet that anybody could use. Like your grandma can use Aqua, send and receive funds. But the goal is anybody could use Aqua and live their lives just keeping Bitcoin only and swapping out to stablecoins, using a Visa card when you need to connect back to the Fiat system. But that's the vision of Jan3, just making Bitcoin ubiquitous. Well, there's always been interest, and it waxes and wanes, kind of with Bitcoin price and what's happening in Bitcoin. Every time the crypto space has a blow up like Terra Luna or FTX, that dampens a lot of our efforts because Bitcoin becomes an unapproachable and undiscussable topic. So this is why it's important to spread also the message of Bitcoin only, because when you're playing with crypto, you're playing with fire, and these things usually don't end very well. But yeah, it does change from time to time based on market situation, but generally there is a lot of interest still. But we've shifted our strategy at Jan3 a lot over the past, I would say, year and a half, to focus less on just engaging at a high level and bringing the theory of why Bitcoin adoption will benefit a country, but more focus on executing and starting small projects with governments to make sure that something's actually happening. Because what we found is a lot of governments are keen to meet and talk about it and possibly announce something, but then things drop off and nothing happens. So we're trying more to do less announcy things and meetings and actual projects, get things greenlit, small pilot projects, sandboxes, and things like that that will bring real adoption on the ground.
Beyond markets and price predictions, Mow also speaks about the responsibility individuals and governments have today. Compared to a decade ago, information about Bitcoin is everywhere. Books, podcasts, documentaries. Back then, he recalls, Andreas Antonopoulos was speaking to empty rooms. Today, knowledge is abundant. So if someone is alive today and ignores Bitcoin, Mow argues, they have no excuse. When hyperbitcoinization arrives, the only person to blame for being unprepared is oneself.